Hi everyone and welcome to episode 13 of Novel Therapy. I'm Kate Fennessy, aspiring author and social media marketer.
And I'm New York Times best-selling author Helen Brown. And 13 isn't an unlucky number.
Exactly, it definitely isn't. And today we have our first guest of season 2 and our first male guest, Paul Bagheera. So welcome, Paul. I'm going to give you a quick little intro.
Thank you. I feel like I'm under extra scrutiny now, being your first male guest.
Yes, you represent all men.
Everywhere.
Everything is male. So Paul, I was trying to think when I met you, but it was through business. Paul is a Mornington Peninsula local who I've met since I've been down there. We've actually worked together.
Yep.
So Paul is a videographer by day. He's a writer. You were the first person to actually introduce me to the Peninsula Writers Club.
Yes, and I was one of the first people to harass you about how deep you should be going with some of your topics in your book.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you were hiding from some of that stuff, and I'm like, that's really interesting.
I was a level back from when I met you, Helen, and I didn't want to talk to him. Yeah, I'm sorry. I told you I was going to write an even more contained, hidden story than I first did with you. That's right. And also, Paul is a CFA volunteer.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we
badly
want
to got you on. Yeah, because we spoke about that last week. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. What we thought we'd do before we dive into sort of talking with Paul is we usually do our checkup. So that's just literally like, what have you been doing? So do you want to go first, Helen? What have you been up to this week?
Someone else to start. Well, look, I was going to have a week of steady writing last week. I went down to Phillip Island, but I ended up, Lydia came and it's my daughter. I had a wonderful time doing stuff for her. And also my revered yoga teacher, Julie Wentworth, died, and I had to write a eulogy for her. And you know, she was 87. Yeah. It's wonderful when you have an older person in your life to kind of guide you, and that's what she did for me. And it was just wonderful, and it was an honour to write something about that.
How did you approach writing a eulogy?
As poetry, really, and as a thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Not only on my behalf, but on behalf of all the yogis, the women that she taught yoga to. Because honestly, I remember lying on the mat, she would inspire me and say, you can do it, you can do it. And I remember lying on the floor with this book, Cleo, in my head thinking, I can do it, because Julie thinks I can do it.
Oh,
there you go.
That's beautiful. It's so important to have one person who believes in you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because we crave our mothers through our lives. We want these, but so often your real mother, you're too busy rebelling against. Yeah. So, you know, someone outside. So it's sad, but it's also okay, you know. Yeah,
it's life.
It is life. Yeah.
Yes.
Some deaths are okay.
So I'm trying to think, I've had a bit of a crazy week too, same thing, a bit off schedule. I've had family visitors, which has thrown things in a delightful way out of routine, which has been really nice. But I had a cool thing on the weekend, which was engagement drinks for a friend from my advertising days. So whenever I get to hang out with my advertising girlfriends, we just big each other up. There's a word I learned from my young millennial friend, it's gas. We gas each other up. So if you gas someone up, that means you just make them feel great. Like we just compliment each other and say, you're fabulous. No, you're fabulous. So we had a good gassing up session. Yeah. Exactly. And the cool thing I wanted to quickly update you, Helen in particular, and you'll get this too, Paul, is I got a good topping up of excellent crazy stories from them about dysfunctional advertising workplaces. And in particular, a couple of my friends have dealt with a very toxic boss, and hearing stories about this boss and her behaviour, I'm like, yes, I'm going to insert this into the workplace in my novel.
I think it's important to break routine.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Sometimes.
A little bit.
Sometimes.
Every now and again.
Yeah.
You know, when it gets to the point where you're sort of no longer following the routine, it's dysfunctional. But I find it refreshes you so much, and as you said, you get those stories and that input.
Yeah.
And also your subconscious does a lot of work. When you think you're doing something else, actually this other part of you is processing.
That's true. So by going out and, you know, hitting the town essentially, I actually came back full of ideas for my novel, which is kind of doesn't make sense.
Paul, you haven't told us about your week. What
exactly.
have you been? Paul, you're a wonderful concoction to me because you're a writer who's a firefighter. Some of our overseas listeners won't know what CFA is, but it's basically a voluntary fire.
It is and especially now with the change coming in legislation, as of July 1st, CFA will be a fully volunteer firefighting organisation.
Wow.
So we've got, it's one of the biggest of its kind in the world. We have something like 30 or 40,000 members.
Really?
Yeah, it's in small country towns, it's a rite of passage. It's just the thing you do. You join the CFA because that's who's looking after the properties.
Wow.
Not that I'm from a small country town now, but yeah, we are a unique organisation in that regard. It's great. Yeah.
And why did you join them?
I moved down to Rye 11 years ago, and I think I knew one person in town.
Did you?
Yeah. And I was trying, and I wanted to get back into doing some charity work because I'd previously done some charity work or community work, and I thought it'd be a great way to get into the community. And I drove past the fire station, and it said volunteer fire brigade, and I literally went, I'm doing that.
Ah.
I mean, who doesn't want to drive a fire truck?
But I met so many people say, oh yeah, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to be a firefighter, but they never do it. Especially male writers. I don't mean to sound judgmental, but most of the blokes I know who are writers wouldn't actually get it and put on that fire hat that you brought in. And
well, it's you know, you talk about where your inspiration comes from. So the first script that I wrote, when I ended up realising I couldn't avoid being a writer anymore, and I had to start getting serious about it. Is a crime thriller based on firefighters.
There you go. So it's been a source of inspiration
Absolutely.
for writing.
Yeah. And you know, you talk about the things you see and experience. I mean, I've gotten to see and do things that, you know, in normal life you just wouldn't see, you wouldn't experience. The training I've gotten has been fantastic. So it's part of that stuff of that living the life that you can, so that it informs your work.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that a lot. That's sort of part of what Helen taught me early on was like, open your eyes, look around you, absorb, listen to conversations, witness life, be in it, so that you've got richer experiences to draw from.
I remember that episode. I was nodding along the whole time. And then there's that thing of, opening yourself up to what's actually happening around you. And tuning also, putting yourself into novel situations at times, you know, where you can just sort of find a new experience or feel something different. Or it's been good.
What's the most memorable thing that's happened to you as a firefighter?
Oh, it's been a lot. Some of it's been tragic. I've certainly seen more death and mayhem in the last 10 years of doing this than I'd previously in my life. And interestingly, when we do have to deal with fatalities, it's a gift. It really is a gift. You know, you feel obviously for the person, you feel for their family and friends, but you are given a very, very stark reminder that we have a finite amount of time, and there's not a single person who, I've had to pull out of a car that got into that car thinking, this is it, this is my last trip. So that reminder can be a real gift.
But how about taking that home with you, those images? How do you cope with that? We
have really good support. I think CFA's really got on the front foot in terms of mental health and mental health support. It can affect people. We have access to services at all times. Whenever there's what we call a critical incident, generally by the time we get back to the station, there'll be peer critical incident support people there. Our brigade is pretty good. Actually, I think our brigade's very good at following up and checking in with people and seeing how they are.
And who is your brigade?
So it's Rye Fire Brigade.
Okay.
There's about 30 of us in the brigade.
I'll just quickly tell international listeners, so Rye is a sort of, how many k's from Melbourne would it be? Like
about 100.
100 k's?
Yeah.
So we're talking on the Mornington Peninsula, which is sort of a regional part at the bottom of Melbourne.
Yeah, a gorgeous
very
part.
technical description. It is a beautiful part of Melbourne. It's a holiday destination as well as local people live there.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the town as well, is it is a very, very seasonal town.
Yeah.
So, we about 8,000 people in the off season.
Yeah.
30,000 plus over summer, and that in itself has a real rhythm and feeling to it, and you sort of really appreciate the way that
oncoming wave of tourists.
It's
really
so handy for a writer too. We did the same thing on Phillip Island. So this season, was it noticeably worse for the work you were doing?
This season is one of the worst we've ever seen. This is the new normal. We're being so, we've known this has been coming for a long time. As long as I've been in the CFA for 11 years, and the entire time they've always talked about the effect climate change is going to have on our fire seasons. We've known about it. This particular season, we knew it was going to be this bad since April.
Right.
We were getting prepared for it and warned and told. So, when our dear leader chose to go to Hawaii. It was quite an interesting choice. Yeah, because this wasn't a surprise.
No. Okay. And where were you personally fighting?
I was a few different areas, all in East Gippsland. We did have some of our members ended up in New South Wales, and I was around Bruthen, Buchan, and then Marlow, those areas.
And how do you go with the lack of sleep, though?
It's very, it's quite military in the way it's set up and organised. So when we get down there, they have what are called staging grounds set up, and the one at Swan Reach that we're based at, I think they had accommodation like tents for 250, 300 firefighters.
So you're saying in tents?
Yeah, so it's like a little city.
You can't get good sleep in tents, I think. Anyway, can you?
No. We call them the chainsaws, the snorers around you.
That's so great. What a great audio visual.
Yeah, so if you've got a chainsaw sleeping in the tent next to you.
Chainsaw.
Yeah. The worst one I went to was years ago. I was firefighting up at was it New South Wales or South Australia? Because I've been sort of a few different places, and we were in a school gymnasium, and they had cots set up for again a couple hundred people in this gymnasium. But you can imagine the high ceilings, the echoing, and it got to the point where at 3 or 4 in the morning, there's people just wandering around because you can't sleep because of the snoring, filming how loud some of those people.
That's hilarious. That's a funny little thing that you wouldn't expect to be part of the experience, but it would be.
Yeah, it's all, and that's the one of the amazing things about being in an organisation like CFA is the things you get to see and do, and not just the actual firefighting side, but some of that more mundane but fascinating things like, well, how does the staging ground work? How do you accommodate and feed 250, 300 people?
Yeah, so there it is, military. What about fear, though? What's your greatest fear?
With the firefighting? Oh, that's a really good question. We're trained and we're well equipped, but you do actually have to have a healthy respect, and that includes having some fear of the fire itself. I don't think I'd want to be on a crew with people who are fearless about the fire, because that's reckless and you're going to end up in a bad situation. So it's a really highly safety focused organisation. Although this year tragically we lost a number of firefighters this season, which was awful. I guess that, the tree coming down, getting trapped, those are the things that you're very conscious of the whole time.
But you're sort of always, I guess, on the lookout and preparing and being cautious not to put yourselves in those
Absolutely.
situations.
And every year we do what's called kill a tree training, where you learn to assess,
to look out for.
Yeah, and how to deal with it. It's one of the biggest hazards we have. Like one of those, 2 of the incidents that killed firefighters this year were tree related. Yeah.
So how did you go? Obviously this summer was so awful for so many Australians, and I know, so we're in a little group of I guess business friends. There's 4 of us who try and catch up semi-regularly. We've been a bit hopeless, but we try to. We were trying to catch up with Paul from about December, and you kept saying I can't because he needed to be on call, and we still haven't. We'll get there. But what was that like for you to sort of put on hold everything over the Christmas, January period, knowing you couldn't really commit to social things, work?
Yeah, it was a little bit weird because, and again, these fires are so big, you knew full well that you'd be going off and doing a deployment, and there were going to be many, many more deployments to come. I think the Tambo complex fire was declared contained last Thursday.
Wow.
So that's, 3 months that one was going for. New South Wales was contained a week or so ago. That's 4 months. So you just accept that's part of the gig.
And we're all heaving a sigh of relief because there's been some rain. So people think, oh yeah, fires, that's so yesterday. But it's not, is it?
We're at the start of our normal season now.
What?
This is when we normally start. So, last year we had the big bunyip fires in March.
So that's insane. So it could all still be ahead.
Absolutely, yeah, easily.
So what can we do? What can ordinary people who aren't brave enough to go and put on that yellow hat that you've got down there? What can we do?
Intimidating.
Do we pressure our politicians to?
Yeah, I think we pressure our politicians to, in my personal view, and just the scientific consensus, to pressure them about climate change. That's the main one. I think from a practical, recovery point of view, take the car, go to East Gippsland for the weekend, spend money with the locals. Like that kind of stuff is really, really important. They some of their biggest income earning time was normally January.
Yeah, and they lost it.
They lost it all. And we had the first day I was heading up to, one of the first days heading up to Beruthen was when they did the mass evacuation notice in East Gippsland. And the caravan, when we got there, the local caravan park on day one was chock-a-block full. The next day there was one caravan left. Because everyone just
heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean,
for a business, I mean, that's
terrible for businesses. And fortunately, we've got very good at that. So I think we would have had many, many more casualties years ago if we'd had these fires. People did pay attention, but those businesses are suffering. So that's a really practical thing.
Okay, weekend trips into the
And
country.
beautiful area. East Gippsland's a beautiful area.
And of course, I heard, is it 1 billion animals? That's
horrific.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
To think how many
I
animals.
know, I found the animal stories really hard I couldn't cope with it. I know human life loss is just horrific, but just for some reason that really upsets me.
Did you see a lot of evidence of that?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And it's not great.
No. Does that come back in dreams and stuff? That would freak me out.
Well, going back to earlier when we say sort of what the fears are and how things can impact you, you don't know when PTSD is going to affect you. And I've heard it, and it's described where they say you can treat it like a bucket with a drip going in, and those drips are the different jobs and the different things you see, and you don't know at what point that bucket's full. And it could be something quite innocuous that suddenly causes the overflow.
Okay.
I had one incident where we had a house fire and we lost a father and his daughter. And a couple of days later, I was due to give a business talk, and I was a babbling mess.
When was this, Paul?
It would have been 5-6 years ago. Yeah. And so that one was the one that affected me.
Okay.
So I straight away went and spoke to people, got help, worked through it, and fine.
Do you feel it's through your system now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Could it happen again? Absolutely. Yeah, easily, depending on
because that new data is kind of coming in all the time, so you got to make sure you're on top of it.
The biggest thing is to go, we're seeing abnormal things, so if you have a strong reaction or an abnormal reaction, that's a normal response to an abnormal situation. You go, okay, it's okay to have this response. This is healthy. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm actually responding to
human being.
To something that's quite, can be quite traumatic.
And we talked about just before, like how it's impacted your writing. Like, I just want to make that link, and for our listeners to know as well that you're actively writing film scripts at the moment. So, what other ways has your experiences at the CFA connected to your writing?
I think it's a good question.
We didn't have you here to
He's on the
bad.
Yeah, no, look, obviously there's the direct stuff where I've used it for characters and for storyline, etc.
Yeah.
But I think just that the novelty of some of the things I've seen and done, and the experience of that, and then watching my own emotional responses to that, and sort of gauging. I mean, it's writers were terrible people. We just mine everything. It's like I said to you. When I rang you up, your cat passed away.
I know.
Tell the truth. Tell me you weren't watching this. Some part of your brain was watching this going, I'm going to use this.
Absolutely.
But what a brilliant scene already. These firefighters lying in the school hall snoring.
Yeah.
And an outsider wouldn't know about that.
That's it's those unusual things that, and that can turn up in anything in your writing.
Exactly.
It may not be a direct correlation, but it'll make you think of something.
It could be an evacuation centre.
Yeah, or it'll give you something interesting that you go, oh, that's a unique kind of real thing that people won't have seen before.
I was listening to a podcast the other day about people that were stuck on this ship because of coronavirus. So they had to spend 2 weeks on a ship, on a cruise, and they were just talking about the meal and routine, and they got 2 hours of fresh air, and they had to extend the internet. And you think, wow, again, it's those little...
It's an excellent setting for a novel because you've got a contained area, you know.
Yes.
Jane Austen would have loved a ship stranded with coronavirus because you've got these characters all on top of each other.
So
can't get away from it. It's just like an English village, but worse, which is even better for a writer. Isn't it terrible?
That's so true. And do you, thinking in that way as well, like, are these people that you've become lifelong friends with, or are they different all the time? Like, are you really close to the people you're in the CFA with?
Yeah, I'm very, very close, obviously, to the people in my own brigade.
Yeah.
And it's that, again, that sort of semi-military thing of, you go into combat together or you go into a firefight together. it brings you very close because you want to really see who someone is, see them under pressure.
Okay.
Character gets revealed immediately in these situations. And because we're relying on each other, and you are relying on that person to keep you safe, and they're relying on you to keep them safe. So you get a strong bond with your crews. The strike teams, you know, when they gather, you know, hundreds of us from all over the place, it's interesting because, you know, you end up, I was crew leading on a truck where there was no one from my brigade. And so you have to very quickly build a rapport and build that group into a unit that's going to work together for the duration of the deployment, and then you break apart again. And you see each other all the time at different deployments and things. So you do get some good friendships out of it.
Are they mostly blokes? How many women?
It's historically predominantly male. There are heaps more women getting involved. We've got 2 terrific young women in our brigade at the moment. We've got 4 operational firefighters that are female in our brigade. 2 young women who joined up recently who are excellent, and it's great because it's a healthier. We don't want it to be all male because that's not a reflection of what the community is, and it's just not a healthy dynamic. So it's been really good.
Chainsaws.
Yeah, too many chainsaws. But you see, a lot of women getting involved, a lot of young women getting involved in CFA, which is fantastic.
That's cool. That's like how young women play AFL and young women just doing all these things
It's
now
great.
that they didn't used to.
It's awesome. Really good. Yeah, and it's just considered, you know, we're just a firefighter. We're all just firefighters.
Now, I brought these, what do you call them, these masks?
We call them P2 masks.
P2 masks, yeah. Because I was, you know, I tried, when we had all the smoke in Melbourne, I tried one, I found it really claustrophobic. And I wonder how you feel wearing this.
Well,
can you put that on?
I can.
If you're watching this on
Actually,
YouTube,
it's not the only one. Normally, I have one of those. One of those masks normally sits inside the helmet.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah, that's where you keep your spare mask.
Wow.
But of this quality, this is just from the
They're the ones we use.
shop.
Yep.
Really?
They're the ones we use.
So the official one. So I'll just describe it for our audio listeners. This is a big yellow CFA helmet with like a visor.
So we have 2 types of. I feel silly sitting here.
It's pretty funny.
We have 2 types of helmets.
Lieutenant on the side.
We have one helmet that's for bushfire fighting.
Okay.
And this kind of helmet, which is a structural helmet. So this is the one you put on when you go inside the buildings.
To protect you from falling.
And the reason I had this in the car is because they've actually just upgraded these. So I've got a brand new one back at the station that looks very Transformers and high tech.
Really?
This is the old one, yeah. But it still works.
It's handsome. It's got a flap on the back. My mother used to sew flaps on the back of our hats to stop us getting polio. But I think yes, because you only got polio from the sun beating down on your neck. But I suspect the flap on the back of your
embers.
Was a furphy.
Embers, particularly in bushfire fighting, and it's protect your neck from embers, because when you're in a full-on ember attack, it's not like nice little pockets of, you know, little red lights flying around. It's wind driven and it's really full on.
So they can hit you and just burn.
Anything that's exposed will get burnt. So
you get very hot.
Yeah.
How do you manage that water intake?
You stay really well hydrated. You try and keep you're not an athlete, but you keep a basic level of fitness so you can cope with it. But the couple of times where I've gone into buildings, I had a Fitbit on when I went in with the gear. And then watching my heart rate afterwards, you get spikes and it stays up really high for quite a long time. So when we come out of a building now, generally the ambulance is there and they're checking us. If we've had to put on breathing
because you're under stress just by
and your adrenaline levels, that would take
a
while to come down, your adrenaline. Kate, you should just try this on, because if you're going to write about anyone wearing these, I'd get 3.
Well, it's because immediately I'm like, how do I do this? And it's weird.
So
Paul will show.
You open
here we are.
that up.
Oh my God.
This one I've used, so I think it's this one.
So these are so again for our audio listeners, these are the masks that people were recommended to buy for
smoke in town, because it was that bad.
Yeah, when the smoke was
so
bad.
we use these when we're bushfire fighting. These are the masks we use.
Okay.
You have them on.
And people are wearing them now for the coronavirus. And look, you just think, they're wearing a mask. But actually, they're really not pleasant. I don't know. Can you speak?
Get it on? Hang on.
It's hard. It's hard to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
because it goes under your nose.
It kind of has to shout.
Pull it open, so it's right over your face.
I'm not very good at this. See, I would already be struggling because I can't.
No, but you see now, I feel hot and panicky.
You're now infected. You've now got.
You're you know what it's making me think of? I don't know how to do it. Here we go. Oh, there we go. That's better. It's making me sort of stressed because it makes me think of like playing. Oh, there we go.
So then this normally with this, you've got goggles, all your gear, your helmet. It's very.
You must have a very good way of dealing with claustrophobia.
You get used to it. Yeah.
I can't look at me. I'm a my hair's everywhere.
Well, that's like the breathing apparatus. You know,
I don't like it.
If you're writing about this time of history, though,
it's a good thing to fit. Yeah. So we got when we do things like with
that's crazy. That's hard.
Yeah.
Breathing apparatus, which is the mask and the tank.
That's like skin diving.
Yeah, well, some people can't do it, just like scuba diving. Some people put it on and realise, not for me.
Yeah.
It's too much. And it is the first time you put it on and use it. It is kind of intimidating, much like scuba diving, because you're going, I'm using this thing now to breathe.
Yeah.
What if it goes wrong? Because I'm dependent on this piece of
I'm
technology.
so glad you made us do that, Helen, because that is not a comfortable experience.
No.
And that is a tiny mask, and we're talking about layers of uniform, heat. Wow.
And you extend that to people trying to protect themselves from this virus, just wearing these things. And then you're supposed to wear goggles as well for the virus now.
Really?
Because it gets through the
eye.
We're basically committing to be spacemen walking down the street. It's kind of crazy.
Or you can just move down the peninsula.
Yeah, but there's no
or
virus.
just buy a ticket to Mars and go to Mars. Wow.
So, confronting the fires as you have, and then the panic around coronavirus, how do you feel about those two contrasts?
It's interesting because I was just before I got here reading an article about what's happening in Italy now, where they've shut down the Venice festival.
Yeah.
They're shutting down all the fashion festivals in Milan, etc.
Because of
coronavirus. They've actually now got a couple of towns that they've isolated, and you can't get in, you can't get out.
Has it got to Italy? I thought
Yeah.
it was pretty much China.
No, it's
Asia.
So.
Wow.
And I guess I started to take it a lot more seriously now. Like up until a week or so ago, I was like, look, it's happening and it's real, but calm down.
Yeah.
Like be cautious, but don't go
now
crazy.
You feel it's a bit more.
Now I'm like, oh wow, this is a really serious problem. Although having said that, CSIRO came out last week. I think they're producing the first trial vaccine at the moment.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Too.
So miracles happen.
Yeah. Oh, that was an amazing story. They're talking about how this protein clamps onto this protein. It's
really?
Yeah.
Science is cool.
Great stuff for a book.
Yeah.
So, Kate, if your lead character ever wears a mask,
now I know what it feels
and I was thinking that red dust, we've still got that.
Yeah, so right, it's on my driveway.
And that's a great metaphor for grief, for fear. It's so hard to get out. I can't get it out of the
it's so true.
Yeah.
And I feel like one memory I have jumping, which you both know, to my story of mine, when my marriage broke down and I was at my most vulnerable in my new house that I was scared of, the responsibility of like, I have a mortgage by myself. The wind kept teasing me when I was very anxious. I'm just trying to say, like, when you're already anxious, if the outside world's reflecting strange activity, it makes you think, oh my God, I'm losing it. So I remember a few windy nights in that first period as a newly separated woman, just so scared because the house was blowing and the wind was crazy, and it feels like everything's echoing what you're feeling outside. It's terrifying. So I imagine for people who were already anxious to smell that smoke or to see the red dust or the strange skies would be terrifying.
It'd be triggering.
It would be, wouldn't it? And that can be a good device in a novel too, that if you're feeling scared and then you open the window and everything looks weird and creepy, you think, oh my God, the world's ending.
That's also the thing, when you talk about going to the big bushfires in particular, they are quite, in the true sense of the word, awe-inspiring, because you are overwhelmed by this thing. This is nature just saying, you're a tiny little insignificant thing and I'm going to do as I please. And that's that kind of humbling experience. There's something quite interesting about that as well, where you really get put back in your place in the world. That we think we're the apex predator and run the show. Nature has other ideas.
I've read that the flames are 5 times higher than the trees or the houses.
They can be,
right?
yep.
That's just
Yeah, and things like it was been so dry that you had fireballs shooting across paddocks and things because of all of the preheated gases coming off those fuels and lighting up, and it's the behaviour. This was the really weird things. We were watching fire behaviour that fires aren't meant to behave this way. It was doing things that The textbooks
Was
say
there
it's going to behave like this.
cyclones or something, or
Because that
hurricanes?
was more, you know, we're watching, so normally fire goes uphill faster and downhill
That's
slower.
right.
Okay.
I've read that.
We're watching it, you know, go downhill faster. Like things that it just shouldn't do.
That's scary.
Yeah, because it was so abnormally dry and hot.
That's full on.
And it's, yeah, as they've been telling us, it's this is what our reality now is. We can expect these kind of seasons more regularly.
Yeah, that's full on. Look, I'm keeping an eye on the time. We are coming to sort of the last sort of point, but I thought it might be good just for our listeners to hear. Just could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with writing and what you're doing at the moment? Because I think it'd be good for our listeners to hear this different sort of world you're in.
I've always been a writer. As a kid, I used to write. So, you know, classic used to write all the time.
Yeah.
As an adult, I craftily avoided writing for literally a few decades. Always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
Avoided doing it.
Okay.
I'll do it when the time's right, when this is right, when that's right, etc. I reached a point where I ended up going through a divorce, and a year or so later, some other things had gone on, and I literally sat in my car, and this is when you talk about sense memory and stuff, I sat in my car in Sorrento in a car park and had my first and only ever panic attack. And I'm going, what? You know, once I realised I wasn't dying, because of course you have a proper panic attack, you think you're dying, I calmed down and I just went, you know, so much of this and what's just happened now is tied into the fact that I'm not doing what it is that I love and want to do. So at that point, I turned my life upside down and started pursuing screenwriting, and haven't been happier.
And update us, what has that looked like since that moment? How have you progressed with screenwriting? How's it been? And
it's like any writing, it's a slog.
Yeah.
So I've just finished my 4th feature script. Literally last week, finished a draft off. I've done 2 or 3 trips to LA. I'm going back to LA in May to meet with representatives and production companies, etc. Look, it's a long. I haven't sold anything.
Didn't you win an award?
I picked up that first script about the firefighters did really well in the Nickel Fellowship, which is a really big competition.
Great.
And the next one did really well at Austin, which is known as the Writers Festival. So
that's cool.
that was encouraging. That was the thing that made me go, you're not a complete fool. Like you can do this. You still need to work your craft, but you know, you're
in the ballpark.
You're in the ballpark. Yeah. Good way of putting it.
And I think you have a unique point of advantage in all of this experience that you've had fighting fires.
Well, that vantage point, as you say, you're accessing these unique and strange and scary
definitely.
I
think I
have take that to Hollywood,
and
you know, not many writers have got that in their pocket.
It's interesting too, because I sort of felt at the time when I started writing, I thought, should I have done this, you know, a decade or 2 decades ago? I've waited too long, I've left it too late. But the reality is I couldn't write what I'm writing now a decade ago. I didn't have it in me. So the firefighting, all of life
and things
experience.
like divorce and grief and loss.
Bringing these young female firefighters, that would be terrific. People would love
cool
that.
Character,
because we all think, firemen, you know, the black and white dog and the guys.
Yes.
But it's not true.
And that's inspiring for women.
It is.
It's when you said that, I got excited to think, these young go-getting women getting into that world.
So take that
would
to
be a cool
Hollywood
character
too, please, on our behalf.
Yes, thank you. We humbly request, as our first and only male guest, you now have the responsibility.
Not only do I have to represent all males in the interview, I now have to.
Our dreams and hopes. Thank you. That would be great. Exactly. And we never quite got to how your week has been. Where are you at right now? I got too excited.
Finished a draft of a script last week that I'm
That's cool.
really
How
happy
long
with.
is that? How many minutes?
It's sitting at 100 pages, so it'll be about 100 minutes.
Okay, that's right. I have a thing, I don't like anything over 90 minutes.
Yeah, so it'll be sitting around 100.
That's good, and they'll cut it.
She'll shave off those 10 minutes for you.
It's and I'm about to go into a month of consultancy with that. So there's a development executive in LA that I'll be working with.
Oh, that's good.
On that script.
That's good.
They'll be giving me notes and feedback, and I'll punch that up and then take that over with me.
Do you have an agent?
No.
That's the next step, I guess.
That's what I'm looking for at the moment, is trying to get a manager and an agent.
Yep.
And you're going back in May.
Going back in May.
Great.
To build on, it is a relationship business.
Yeah.
So I've started building some very good relationships there. So I'm going to go back to see those people bring them up to date on the latest work, meet new people,
Right.
and they're happy to work with people from wherever, but it also helps them to see that you're serious.
Yeah, you're committed.
That you're committed.
And I just talking to you today, I see all these visuals, of the very successful Netflix things we're watching that have funky, strong women in them.
Yeah.
You've got fires. It sounds very sexy.
Yes, and it's high stakes.
Yeah, and I love Australians
Yeah.
in America.
Yeah, and
So you've got a lot
strange.
going for
I
you.
love those strange, unique moments of seeing weird things you'd never normally see. I think that's cool.
Yeah, that whole
Those
that
moments.
sort of behind the scenes thing.
Yes.
That's Jewel.
Because
Yeah.
you're right, because we don't imagine that.
No.
Like an average person just cannot.
And then owning up
themselves.
to those very hard moments of breakdown too, and that's
Panic
hard
attacks,
work.
exactly,
Yeah,
all
you've got
that
it.
stuff. Especially from a man, I'd love to read a man's perspective of a panic attack, for
Yes.
example.
Mm.
I'd love to know what that feels. I mean, I've had anxiety too, but I haven't heard men talk about it.
They're dreadful. There you go.
I know.
Well, I end up,
Go deeper, as you told me, Paul.
Yeah.
You know.
No, and it was it's why I laughed about when I talked about the cat, because I
Yeah.
also knew, even in the midst of having this panic attack and that I was wanting to pursue writing, I knew that as a writer, I'm going to use this.
Yeah, that's right.
This will
and
come
so
back
you
to something.
should, yeah. But look,
Mm.
I don't think you should feel bad about it. It's sharing your humanity. It's actually a
Mm.
very generous thing.
Absolutely.
And from the cave times, it's been how we've made sense of everything is through storytelling. And if you can make sense of a male panic attack that doesn't end in suicide, you're going to help
I think so. I think
dozens,
that would
if
be
not
incredibly
thousands of
powerful.
men.
I do
you
think
know?
I think it's really important for men to talk about that.
So they
and,
say.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and to talk
Yeah.
about mental health issues in terms of going, again, this is a normal part of living.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
you.
you don't have to be emotion
Yeah.
You
proof.
don't have to be Superman.
No.
And you're not broken.
No.
You're just having a rough patch.
I love that.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so for the end, usually this is at what we call our clinic. Helen will often give me advice or as a summary. Is there anything, Helen, that you feel that Paul and I need in terms of a diagnosis for this conversation?
Well, I was going to go back to something very basic, which we can talk about another time, but I think because it's been such a great session, I'll just end this with this wonderful quote. There are 3 rules to writing a novel, and it probably applies to scripts as well. 3 rules. Unfortunately, no one has discovered them.
I was so
Yeah.
waiting then.
Sounds like
Classic. Sucked in. That's good.
And that doesn't
I like
follow the
that a lot.
scripts.
I think the diagnosis is keep going, basically.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, just to wrap it up, we do a quick little. We touch base with social media because, as you know, that's my day job. So, a quick little update. At first, I feel like you're going to roll your eyes, Paul, but it's about hashtags, and I know you both don't like hashtags in various ways.
I find them impossible.
Well, there you go. But I've got a quick update about hashtags because all around this time of the year, like at the end of the year and the start of the year, there's all these things like what matters in 2020 for social. I just want to perhaps inspire you a little bit as you're writing, because the message is basically with Instagram, which, as we all know, is still a pretty key platform, particularly for brand. And for writers, Instagram is actually incredibly powerful. There's a community of writers on Instagram, and if you use hashtags, you can connect with them. So even as you're talking about this very niche scriptwriter world, there probably are niche hashtags that include those people. So it is worth figuring it out. So I just wanted to sort of end on this latest stat that if you do a post with a hashtag on Instagram, it's actually 12% more likely to get engagement. So it does matter. So straight away, the minute you add a hashtag, you're exposing your content to more people. And I think one thing that's sort of relevant here is if you think of these community hashtags, so it's things like am writing fiction, script writing, script development, those hashtags.
Firefighters who write.
Firefighters who write, that's super
Very
niche.
niche.
Yes, that's exactly it. And the advice at the moment is go niche. Find your little community because they're on there. So it might be for someone like you could use hashtags like Mornington Peninsula, writers, Mornington Peninsula writers. So get niche, CFA volunteers. So all those worlds that you're in exist online, and hashtags can help to find them. So I know hashtags kind of annoy people and they're bothersome, but if you think about it, they literally are a way to organize and categorize content. So if you start getting niche, you could connect with people and just expose also yourself online by what you're doing. So
Well, I
that's
think
my little takeaway.
The biggest value you said there also is the idea of community.
Community,
Because
exactly.
we all know that you're sitting there staring at a screen how many hours on your own.
Yeah, and we can all get a bit eye-rolly, but things like, we've talked about social days, like World Book Days coming up, or people who do NaNoWriMo, however you pronounce that. If you're doing a writing challenge, use the hashtag for it. You might find some people taking that same sort of challenge with you. So don't forget about hashtags. I know they're not as sexy as firefighters, but they're still important.
Or hashtag cakes on a plate that nobody has touched.
We haven't yet, but we will as soon as we wrap up. But yes, but thank you so much, Paul. That's
thank you.
really
Fabulous.
interesting hearing those little insights and that lovely mix of writing and life. And
we've got listeners all over the world, and they will just love this story, because people are saying Australia is the canary and the rest of the world's going to go up. And this is where you've got to write about it for us.
And I think, and you're right, people are looking at us and going, this is a canary, and there's such an interest in what's happened here. I think because it was so staggeringly large.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm a Kiwi by birth, but I've fallen in love with Australians all over again, because their resilience through this, their courage, their guts, their determination to rebuild their lives, it's just inspiring.
Yeah. It's true. It does. I think you said it last week. Like, these events tend to bring out people's extremes.
Yeah.
So and I just love that image of you building that team that's just been thrown together in a truck, and you've got to quickly tap into everyone's best characteristics and go for it, don't you?
And that's the so that's one thing I didn't mention about. That's the great thing about being in CFA as well, is that you are surrounded by people who want to help. And I think the thing I love about it the most is that we get to we turn up when someone's having one of, if not the worst day of their life, and we get to help. And that's a real privilege.
Yeah.
They'll be very pleased to see you.
Yes, I imagine you'd be very welcome, in those moments. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you on behalf of the community that you protect. Like, that's so incredible to think that people like yourself are volunteers. It is really unique in Australia.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. So thank you for all your hard work, and let's hope the rest of the fire season is really chilled out.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And it's not over.
No, I know, it's full on.
And best of luck in Hollywood.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll
keep
keep
us
you posted.
posted.
Yeah.
It's in our group, so you can keep us posted.
Fantastic.
But thank you. I think we're perfectly on time. Look, Helen, we've managed to keep it under 45, which is good for a guest.
Yes.
So thanks again, and we will speak to you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.